All right, class, so today we're going to do an introduction into the Fertile Crescent. This is what a lot of historians, a lot of people call the cradle of civilization, if you will. We've got a map up for you here that kind of shows you it actually looks like a crescent. Surrounds the two major rivers. We think the first people settled here around 8,000 BC. We'll get a little bit more on the difference between BC and AD as we get a little further into world history. This is kind of one of our opening lessons. So to get us started today, I'd like you to get your interactive notebooks out. Okay, you're more than welcome to work with a partner if you would like to work with a partner to answer these questions. But there are 4 questions that I want you to write down and answer together, and then we're going to share, and then we'll kind of talk about why what you've been through might be very similar to what the civilizations in Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent went through. So, first questions, okay? How many of you have ever been through a substantial flood? Not just like, you know, the ditch out in front of your house got full of water and you ran down and played with boats in it. Like substantial, came up into your house, damaging kind of flood. Okay, if you have been, write a little yes down there and write what year or what you remember about it next to it. Okay, I'm going to give you just a second to do that. Okay, now the second thing I want you to do, and you can, like I said, you can talk and share, pair and share with your partner if you would like to. I'd like for you to talk about how many of you have ever farmed for food. Like how many of you can actually farm food? Not you went and picked strawberries with your mom one time out the pay-to-pick strawberry patch. Like how many of you have actually ever planted something, watched it grow, harvested the crop from it? You've literally farmed food. Write down again, yes or no on that, and then what your experience was like with that, okay? All right, now, one thing that I want you to think about, because so many of us are now farther away from our food source than we've ever been in a lot of cases, what would your life be without the grocery store or the corner quickie mart or the gas station where you stop to get all your snacks on your way to school? What would life be without that? What would that look like? And an interesting kind of point to bring up here that most people don't know and most people don't realize is most grocery stores only have around 2 to 3 days worth of food on hand. So that's why you see, like when we had the hurricanes last year here in North Carolina, that's why you see when you go into the store after a couple of days, all the food's gone. It's because the trucks couldn't get through, and literally, like the Super Walmart next to my apartment complex was done. It was gone, no food. So what would living life without a grocery store be like? Okay? So think about that for a second, and then we're going to go back and I'm going to pick up a couple of the answers for the first 2 questions. Okay, so Janice, why don't you share with us what it was like to go through a flood? Okay. Oh, wow. So it was like all the way up into the house. Okay, scary? Yeah, absolutely, can be really, really scary, right? All right, now let's jump to the next one because I'm really curious about this one. We'll share some more flood stories toward the end of class when we have some time. How many of you have actually ever farmed? Nobody. Wow. So other than like paying to go pick strawberries, anybody at least gone to pay to pick strawberries or blueberries or something? Okay, a couple of you have at least gone to do that. So none of us know what it's like to farm. So imagine that you had to plant it, you had to grow it, and you had to hope that the floods wouldn't wipe it out, or your other choice with the Fertile Crescent was to move further out into the desert and plant your crops, but then you're not guaranteed that you're going to get enough water, and they may die for a lack of water. So it's called drought. Right? This is where we'll get into a little later. We're dealing with some of the vocab now, things like silt and flooding and delta and things like that you'll do on your map, but we're also starting to look at things like desert and dry climates, and we're eventually going to work our way into why they did temples and why religion was established during this time period. So, question for you. If you had your choice, living along the Fertile Crescent, right, we know that there's silt, we know that there's great places to plant crops, we know that there's really cool things that you can do there, but we also know that when you do that, you run the risk of your entire house and farm being flooded out. So how many of you would risk the Fertile Crescent so that you could at least grow better food? And how many of you would go to the desert? Raise your hand if you would do desert. If you would live out in the desert and try to bring water to your crops from the river because you don't want to fool with the flood. Okay, there were some people that did that. That's why we have villages just outside of the Fertile Crescent. How many of you would say, you know what, I don't care, I'll risk the flood because I need guaranteed food and I'll take the chance of the flood taking it away? Ah, see, even better. Most of us are willing to risk the chance of flood in order to get food, or at least better food, right? Because what you're going to grow in the desert, even if you bring water out to it, it's not going to be as good as what you grow in that really rich soil that gets left behind after the flood, which is silt. That's one of our vocab terms for this unit, okay? All right, how many of you would be willing to try to find a way to dig water all the way out to your crops in the middle of the desert? It's going to be hot, but you don't have to deal with the flood, but you're going to have to dig a big canal or a watering trench, if you will. It's basically a big ditch that you dig from right at the edge of the river, and it usually kind of down slopes from the river out to where your crops are, right? Irrigation canals is what they're called, right? So you're going to irrigate your crops. How many of you would do the desert if you knew you could get water from the river? Okay, so that makes it a little bit easier. Now you're not running the risk of the flood, but you're looking at a heavier workload, right? Okay, so the basic geography, we've hit the basic geography of the Fertile Crescent now, right? You kind of see how it's laid out. We talked about the flooding of the Tigris and the Euphrates River, right? We've talked about, and we've think, paired, share about personal experiences that we've had with flood, personal experiences that we've had with farming. We've touched on some of the early vocab words. We're going to get a little bit more into civilizations here in a minute. But now what I'd like you to do, around the room there are different QR codes. Okay, and these different QR codes will give you general maps of the areas, short text about various civilizations, including some of the vocabulary terms, some of which I've already shared with you, some will be new. So take your interactive notebooks and head around the classroom, and hopefully this gives you a chance to move around a little bit, but also engage with some different websites. Some of them are a little bit advanced. Look, see, I'm going to push you a little bit here. Okay, some of them are a little bit advanced. Some of them are actually elementary level websites that I put up there just to give you some pretty cool pictures and some funny cartoons that you can laugh at, okay? All right, so take just a minute, go around, hit the QR codes. You can buddy up with the same person that you were with on the first assignment, and you guys can go around, make sure you get all the vocab terms, and that you also deal with the websites as well, okay? All right, so now that you have all that information, okay, here's what I want you to do as kind of your wrap up for today. Okay, so you've got all the vocab, you've seen the pictures of the Fertile Crescent, we've talked about our own personal experiences. So what I would like for you to do is draw a map of the Fertile Crescent. You've got colored pencils and sheets of paper on your desk for you and your partner to work with, just one map per group, okay? I want you to spend the remaining part of class, and I'm going to come around and kind of help you out with it, but I want you to spend the remaining part of class drawing a map and seeing if you've changed your mind between desert and floodplain and which place you would like to live and where you think you would put your settlement, but also use some of your vocabulary and start labeling some places on that map. You can use what's called a key. It's another key geography term that we're going to learn this year. Build a key at the bottom that you can draw symbols on your map, and then in that key tell me what each one of those symbols mean. And then I want you to go a step further, and below that box I want you to give me the definition of each of those vocabulary terms so I know that you know what it's talking about, not just where it is, okay? Also, hopefully by now, some of you have begun to figure out that temples were developed during this time period. I'm going to leave that one for tomorrow. That's our little teaser for tomorrow. Why would they be so interested in building temples and religion if they were so close to starving and floods and deserts and everything else? Wouldn't they be more interested in just focusing all their energies and all their tasks and all of their time on growing crops and making sure that they had water, why would they build these huge temples during this time period? We're going to discuss that a little bit tomorrow. So there's your teaser. Today, though, before you leave, you need your map done, your key done, your key vocabulary, as well as definitions, okay? Start on that, and you've got about 15-20 minutes here at the end of class to work on that together. Shouldn't take you long to draw out a basic map, and like I said, I'll be walking around. Be more than happy to coach you. If you need help, just raise your hand, and we'll go over it. I'll bring you the websites, and also feel free, while you're working on the map, to go back to one of the QR codes. If you feel like you need some help or you forgot something, go back and grab something from the QR codes and bring it back. That's what it's there for, okay? Great job today, guys. Get started, and we'll get to it. All right, so now you've had time to get all your maps. Most everybody got done. As I was walking around, it looked like most everybody got done. Now what I want you to do is go back to your interactive notebook, okay? You're going to turn those maps in. I'm going to grade those maps. But before we do, I want you to go back to your interactive notebook, write down one summary paragraph about what you learned today. You can include even your flood story if you would like to, okay? What you learned today, and also at least 2 of the key vocabulary terms in your interactive notebook, okay? That'll be your wrap up for today. I'll come around and take your maps up, and then we'll get started on temples and religion tomorrow. And one last thing, just as a note to my teacher, apologize for the dress. We're still in work days here at my school, and as you can see, there are no students, and I'm still recovering from a fall. So this was the best I could put together with the injury that I sustained falling really, really hard last week from a dizzy spell due to a migraine. So I apologize for that, but hopefully you've gotten a chance to see what we like to do in geography and world history here in North Carolina. Thanks.